Well, Wasps called off their game against Exeter at the weekend and confirmed that the club has gone into administration. We can have a chat now with their chief executive, Stephen Vaughan. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
Yeah, hi guys.
It's probably a little bit irrelevant, really, but two questions in one. Who delivered the news? And when that news was delivered, was it that's the end, or was there a genuine hope that something could be salvaged?
Yeah, well, I delivered the news, as I have throughout. Jim, we'll talk through it in a second, but when you're faced with difficult situations, I think there's different ways you can be, and I think from the start, I think it was about being honest and respectful and talking to people like you'd like to be spoken to. So, absolutely no lies, just tell the guys how it is. And, even since that difficult news, last night, this morning, been inundated with messages from everybody saying, look, difficult. And I was sore yesterday. I was angry yesterday. I was upset yesterday, but thanks. Thank you for just being upfront and honest with us. So I delivered the news. I had some people there from FRP, who are advisors, who effectively gave the important regulatory advice and what happens now and what form you're filling for this and all that good stuff. But and then to answer the other part of your question, it was really honest. It was that I think it's the third time now in 10 days or a couple of weeks since I've addressed the group. Plus emails and everything else, and it was effectively nobody came forward with an offer for the rugby part of the business or the sports part of the business, the rugby and the netball. Whilst we still have other options around the venue part of the business, which is very profitable in its own kind of skin. Nobody came forward with enough for the rugby. So as of yesterday, the message I was giving was that effectively, everybody in that room was no longer employed, made redundant. And then obviously lots of questions fell out of that. Was it a final conversation? Not necessarily. And as we spoke through, we talked about the fact that, just today, fellas, I've been in meetings today with other interested parties, and I'm going to do the same on Thursday. So there are still conversations ongoing there. Whilst we're in administration, we can still pull this around. But, what I obviously said to the guys is it's got to that point now where, we would love you to give us a little bit of time to get something over the line with a like-minded group of people that have got Wasps at the very core of what they're about. However, if you have other offers, you've got families, you've got your livelihoods and everything else in front of you. We're not saying stop on our behalf, but what we are saying, if you can hold those offers out without losing them, then there may be something there, but we can't promise. So it wasn't final, Jim, but I think the guys are, they're intelligent boys and girls, and I think they know that we've had a lot of time to get this done, and we'll keep going until we're told not to. But I think a lot of people saw it as the end, but obviously we're working hard for that not to be the case. Until late last night, myself, Lee Blackett, Dave Bassett, Matt Everard, Chris Holland, we sat around the table chewing the fat about what the future could look like in the Championship, what those budgets could look like, the personnel, etc., assuming that we can get something over the line. And this is not rose tinted in any way, shape, or form, and I mean this, but if we can find somebody to get behind us and we are in the Championship next season, I'm very pragmatic about it. This business financially has been broken for a long time. And no matter what we've done over the last few years, which has been record breaking commercial deals and Coventry City coming back in, Coventry Building Society Arena coming in to do the stadium naming rights, getting to the Premiership final, cutting £4 million off the wage bill. Everything that we've done, pretty much in any other club, would have set us right for 10 years. Honestly, if I was back at Gloucester, we could forget about worrying about budgets for 10 years. But unfortunately, Wasps, and I kind of knew looking in, it was losing money every year, but I didn't quite understand the severity of it until I put my head under the bonnet. And now we've had to change what we've done on match days, and we get a lot of stick from supporters going, we used to have these huge fan villages, we used to have face painters, we used to have this, and why don't we have Willie LaRue anymore? And you know, the George Smiths of this world, and the Willie LaRues and the Curtly Beals, and guess what? The world changed, and you know, when I came in, my MO was clearly to take things back, peel it back, stop giving away free tickets, you know, rein in the marketing and cut the costs and improve the revenue, which we did. But unfortunately, the debt pile was so massive, it made no difference, literally made no difference. So that's really sad and disappointing. But if it means we go to the Championship and we start again with the core group that are there now, who knows? You know, maybe win the Championship in year one and come back with a different group, with a different ownership. You know, is that the worst thing? In 155 years plus of Wasps, Saracens have been down, Northampton have been down, Newcastle have been down, Quins have been down. It happens. So I think you know, we can get the violins out and feel sorry for ourselves. Yeah, we've been made redundant. I've been made redundant, but there are worse people off than what we are at the moment. And if we can keep this group together, you know, having a trip to Jersey next year, you know, might not be the worst thing in the world. Albeit last time I went to Jersey, it involved Danny Cipriani, so maybe I'll miss that trip.
Stephen, where is Derek Richardson in all this, and is he taking accountability? When you look at what happened with Saracens, I know it's a separate story, but he basically fell on the sword and it stopped at his door. We've been talking about Worcester and the owners of the club and how the club was run. If we're speaking frankly, it'd probably be more difficult for Goody because he has a closer affiliation to Derek. I've met him once, but all the stuff was said about the Worcester owners, everything that was said about Nigel Ray, about the way that the business of the club was run. And there's a few different articles out there, and you might actually talk about some of the bits when you answer this question. Was he at the meeting yesterday as a club owner, and has he taken full accountability for what's happened?
You know, it's difficult to talk about individuals. You know, Derek has been at the club a lot longer than I have. And, you know, I believe that, you know, he saved the club back in the day, to be fair to him. Brought them up to Coventry, into a new arena. Franchise models are difficult by nature to prove to work. Again, you know, without sounding like a politician, I have a view on how leaders should interact at times like this, especially in times like this. You know, Derek is in a situation where I think the venue is extremely important to him, and the business of the venue is obviously profitable, and it's potentially an easier sell than the rugby. And I think he'd be the first to admit that he probably hasn't been as close to the rugby as he had in the years where we were challenging and spending as much, if not more than anybody else for those periods of time. He did turn up yesterday. Actually, he didn't present or speak, or anything. He sat in the room, yeah, you know, Derek's been here for a long time, and he's invested in the club, and he made it very clear a little while ago that he wasn't going to do that anymore. And obviously that becomes problematic for an organisation like ours with such debt, that if your owner isn't going to effectively act as a guarantor, then you're relying on trading. And I don't need to tell you about what COVID did to organisations. So yeah, it is what it is. You know, Derek's his own person, and he'll work his way through this, and hopefully he'll get a venue sale, and he'll be happy about what his what his kind of legacy looks like. And yeah, I think I'll leave it there.
And then in terms of obviously the business itself, now all rugby clubs are different. Some own their stadiums, some don't. Obviously with Wasps, there's different businesses within the Wasps holding group, and we've talked about the netball. You know, they're all redundant as well, the women's rugby as well as the men's rugby. How have we got to this point where there is such an asset in terms of the venue, yet ultimately the rugby club is, you know, separated from that effectively now, and people are just interested in buying the venue itself, which, you know, you're saying openly is pretty profitable, but the rugby is certainly not. 18
months ago, we went to refinance the bond, and we were doing quite well, lots and lots of interest. COVID kicked in, the whole banking model went down the tubes, everybody backed out, and it became quite obvious through that process that everybody wanted to buy the venue. Very profitable, and all the other things I spoke to you about. But unless you're a real rugby nut, and a real philanthropist around the game itself, or Wasps, there was nobody interested in the sporting side, purely based on the numbers. And I think COVID scared everybody because they realised that as soon as that kicked in, that all the sports business just shut down immediately and had to take on more debt with Sport England and everybody else. So as the process went through, we actually got led down the aisle by a large high street bank, and the bond was going to be done. They backed out, literally. They jilted us on the altar, and that kind of kick-started the impact of where we are now. And then what's happened since then with the advisory group and the administration, it's kind of become fairly obvious. If you're the ownership group, for example, and you're the board at ACL, which is Arena Coventry Limited, that there is still a good prospect and a lot of excitement with people financially backing the venue because it's extremely profitable. And it's got a great covenant and it's backed by the council and all that good stuff. Whereas the rugby piece clearly is more niche, and there aren't many people around. If there were people out there with fortunes who just were into rugby, we would have found them by now. I can guarantee you. So that's why they've been split, to give the venue the best opportunity of being able to salvage something. Wasps has gone into administration. It had to go into administration because by nature, administration takes away a lump of the debt. So therefore, it becomes more attractive. So since it went into administration yesterday, it's allowed us to have different conversations with different organisations. So that's why they were split.
And where are the powers that be? I say the powers that be. The powers that be that people think are the powers that be. It doesn't seem like there seems to be one. The governance is absolutely shot. Where are the PRL? Where are the RFU? The people that you'd expect to look to. It just seems like it's been absolute carnage in the Prem. Since it started, it just seems like it's a complete shit show, Stephen.
Yeah. Look, I think first things first, I'll give Simon Massey-Taylor some credit because at least he's stood up and fronted it up. He's jumped in front of people. It's very difficult for him because, you guys know the model. I've spoke about this publicly a million times. When I came into rugby 10, 11 years ago, I was astonished at the setup that owners could just rule the roost and just completely, the investor group, that if they don't like something, they can just vote it out, irrespective of whether it's good for the game or not. So that's the first thing. And I've always been talking about an NFL-style commissioner. We need Simon Massey-Taylor or somebody else in there who's got some teeth, who's got the authority and the accountability to make decisions on behalf of the group. Until then, it's potluck. If you've got enough, it was a bit like the salary cap every time it rises, or the embargo on players. Remember that when we were in the middle of COVID and a couple of clubs wanted to re-sign all their players, so we all had to. You couldn't run a business like that in the real world, but because it's archaic in its setup, it's the same as it was 20 years ago. That's the fundamental problem. So I do have sympathy for Simon, and as far as they've been as helpful as they can be. They have rules and regulations. I know people have thrown them under the bus about give us the P shares, and the way I see it and the way people I work with is, we've got to make a decision at some stage. Is it more important to say, no, you can't have the P shares, because if we did that for you, then we'd have to do it to other people, and 3 clubs could go out of business next week and say, we want the P shares, we've gone into administration, and it kind of upsets everybody else. I get that. But that's also versus the backdrop of Worcester have just gone out of business. 5 minutes up the road in the West Midlands, a massive brand like Wasps have now gone out of business. By the way, we know the reasons for it, and it's been long coming. But for the good of the game, is there another option here where we say, look, that is the rules, but we've got to do something here. We've got to at least allow the organisation to buy those P shares back. Don't take them off the clubs if they get back up, because it makes it less attractive to investors coming in. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The RFU have been quieter, without a shadow of a doubt. We've been dealing with their regulatory and legal people, and they're all very competent. They'll point you to Rule 5.4.1 means you can't do this. Rule 3.8 means you can't do this. And we're suspended for this, and we're not suspended for that. Again, difficult for them. They're dealing with what they're dealing with. What we would have loved, I guess, was around the table with everybody to kind of try and talk about it with the human emotional side as well. And we even threw Mark Rugby at them last week to try to get some hearts and minds changed. But everybody will fall back on regulations, and it's kind of noticeable now that And again, I'm not blaming Simon for this because he's been dealt a difficult hand, but 5 minutes ago, 14 clubs was the answer. Now a couple of clubs are in trouble. 10 clubs is the answer. And so I don't believe that that's a strategic direction. I believe it's where they are now, and it feels like the right thing to say. Having said that, could 10 and 10 be a good solution? I think if it's run by the same governance model like in France, where you've actually got some decent, 5 or 6 decent teams in that second tier with a chance of getting up and exciting, yeah. But if it's just one team winning it every year, there's probably no point, to be quite frank. But so yeah, look, it's I don't want to throw them under the bus because they've got their own jobs to do. It's concerning, I guess, that somebody couldn't really grab it by the kahunas at this point from one of the governing bodies to say, look, this is wrong now. We need to do something about this, and we need to change what we've been doing for the last 100 years to make a difference, because people's livelihoods. I worry about the community game in the area. My 7-year-old lad plays at Bromsgrove on a Sunday morning, and who's he aspiring to go and play for now? There's nobody in the area. So I think there's a much wider impact than just, that club doesn't like it, so you can't do it. So that's disappointing. But I guess what nobody likes is the blame game, and effectively the business model didn't work. We know the rules, and I don't want to appear bitter because it isn't the RFU and PRL's fault that Wasps has ended up like this. It's other people's fault, and it's poor decisions, and it's an insatiable appetite for debt over the years, or whatever it might be, despite the best efforts of everybody else. So yes, I think they could have done more, but I don't think we should be pointing fingers at this point.
And just on that, obviously you talked about the business model then. The business model is pretty similar for every club, and it's basically a benefactor or a group of benefactors servicing the debt or filling that black hole. And Jim and I have spoken about this at length. Obviously, the wages went through the roof over the last sort of 6, 7, 8 years. What is the business model that needs to change, and how does it change to make this game sustainable? Whether you're a Wasps in the future or a Northampton Saints at the minute, whoever they are, they've all got similar issues, right?
Absolutely, and honestly, but for the grace of God, it was Worcester, it was Wasps. There are others it could be very soon. And yeah, look, as you know, you may have Steve Lansdowne as your owner. You have no issues, do you? Quite frankly, you got one of the richest men in Britain, and there are no issues. But guess what? There aren't that many of those people around now. So people have taken on huge debt over the years, and COVID has accelerated those problems. And there are a number of clubs up for sale. I'm not going to talk about them, but there are a number of clubs up for sale as well. You even saw Mick Crossan this week saying, somebody come and take it off me. I don't want it anymore. Just carry it on, and you can have the P shares. I don't care. So that's not a very healthy kind of sentence, is it really, when somebody's saying things like that? So what needs to change? Economics would suggest that clubs are spending more than their income that's coming in. Very simple. If the income coming in doesn't outstrip your outgoings, you have to rely on a benefactor. The issue we have with that is we've got a lot of investor fatigue at the moment, which quite simply, owners are at a point where a lot of them are rich guys, but not high net worth, super rich guys like you get in football. And I think most of them will kind of see £1 million a year or £2 million a year max. But when it starts to get 4, 5, 6, it's no fun anymore. For these people, and they think about their own families and their own stockpiling, etc. So what needs to change in the short term, clearly in the short term, is that costs need to be managed. We also need much better commercial deals from the central revenue perspective, and this is where the issue becomes, because CVC obviously now take a quarter of all of the distributions from all of the clubs. So obviously the owners took a nice chunk of cash the other year, gave away a quarter of the business, and now obviously the distribution now is 3/4 of what it was. That's your first problem. You then have obviously the big dangly distribution is the television deal. And at the last TV deal, it was another BT Sport doing another kind of rollover of their deal. Didn't get any better. Whereas we look at our French counterparts, their deals are 3 or 4 times what ours are, and their audiences are enormous. So it's a bit chicken and egg there. We need a much better television deal. We need better overseas media rights. We need to get on top of the whole, kind of electronic marketing of Premiership rugby around the world. We've got to grow the eyeballs, and we've got to grow that bottom line number coming in, because without that, it still relies on the benefactors to come in. So quite frankly, the difficulty is that we just don't have that right balance. You're going to have teams with very, very well-off owners that will just play money, but just to win things all the way through. And the difficulty is, it's very easy to say to a team, just don't invest anymore then. Just don't do it. It doesn't matter what Saracens or Harlequins or Leicester or Gloucester do. Just don't invest anymore. Take 3 or 4 million off your wage bill. But then the issues come then. Your crowds dwindle massively. Players don't want to come anymore. You end up paying more for players because there's a premium to join your club. So you kind of have to compete to a certain level. And what's the point of being in bloody sport if you're not anyway, by the way? Because people can see quite through that straight away. So there's a fundamental model issue. But still, as we are, and I talked about this ownership model, even though clubs like Worcester and Wasps and others are in financial difficulties, there are 4 or 5 clubs that aren't, and they just want to plough on and plough on and plough on. And whilst they do that, you can't get unanimous decisions across the line. So it just makes it even worse. So go back to the fundamental issue of the model. It's broken and it needs changing.
What role did Saracens play in overinflating the costs for other clubs and players?
It's hard to say, really. I think if you look at Saracens, we're not here to flog Saracens. They did what they did. And they took their penalty. A lot of Saracens players, if you think about it, remained at Saracens. An unbelievable pool talent, clearly. But it'd be very difficult to say, what role did Saracens play? It was hard at the time. I was at Gloucester at the time, and we got to a semi-final against Saracens. And we had our pants pulled down. But I remember watching that game at the time, and we all knew the rumours and everything else. But I spoke to David Humphreys after the game, and we said, we tried our best. We got beat. Can't remember the score. But I remember on the day, Saracens, I don't know how many internationals they had, but it was a full team of internationals, and they had 2 British Lions on the bench and another bunch of. I remember then thinking, wow, just no idea how that happened. And of course, at the time, we were more upset about the fact that if it had been found out earlier, who knows, that could have been Gloucester winning the Premiership that year, and life could have changed at Kingsholm. And I know Wasps were affected the season before. So I don't think we really ponder too much about, what Saracens done in terms of inflating the cap. I think it really comes down to certain club owners who, and by the way, I have some sympathy. So if you're Bristol, and you've been out of the Premiership for a long time, and you've got, by the grace of God, you've got a Bristolian there who's got bags of cash, and your objective is to win the Premiership and to be a Heineken Cup winning team. I completely get that. I absolutely get that. Why wouldn't you want to be? We want to be beating Leinster, don't we? We want to be beating Racing and Toulouse and those teams. And I'd be very proud of an Exeter or a Saracens doing that. But fundamentally, the model can't just be about buying the trophy. But my heart, I love watching, a Saracens game versus Exeter and the grudge match against Harlequins. I think it's fantastic, and I love the best talent in the world, the Mario Toges, etc., the Marcus Smiths being in this country, and we wouldn't want those players to go. And that marquee player is very important. But I think the reality is, the Saracens thing's come and gone, and it is what it is. Fundamentally, I don't think Nigel Ray's a bad person. I think his heart's in the right place. He did the wrong thing. Mark McCall's a top guy. Joe Shaw's a top guy. A bunch of good guys, and they've done what they've done. Not the first team to do something wrong, but I don't think it's had a fundamental difference this far on, and I don't think that could be blamed. I think it's more around the club owners have had the ability to keep stretching the spend at a point where it doesn't match the income coming in, and it's been there for everybody to see. They've known what income's coming in, but still chosen to put a budget there which is over and above what people can afford.
A genuine question then, because this has all accelerated, hasn't it, really, over the last couple of years, but over the last few months. What is the fucking point of a Heineken Champions Cup now? I mean, really, when you look at it, the whole thing, and this is only my belief, but the likes of a Saracens, for example, let's just use them because we spoke about them, gave themselves an opportunity, however we look at that. It doesn't matter, we don't need to go over old ground. At what point, or at any given Saturday, Sunday or Friday night, does a Prem team now compete in a competition littered with no salary caps and 14, 15 million pound salary caps? I mean, what is the point, do you think, in all this, Stephen, of that?
No, it's interesting. We played Munster last year in our Heineken Cup group. So we beat Toulouse, and then we went to Munster. Now, between Toulouse and Munster, I think I've got this right. We played Saracens away, Exeter at home, and Quins away. I think I'm probably wrong. Someone's going to tell me now. I've got that completely wrong. But anyway, 3 really hard games. Sale away. I can't remember what it was. And we'd lost, I don't know, Joe Launchby, Jack Willis, Tom Willis. We'd lost a rake of players. You know, we had a tight head on the bench covering loose head, you know, blah, 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 blah. And the week after, I think we were away to whoever, Gloucester, I can't remember. And I sat down with the CEO and the chairman at Munster just before the game, having a bite to eat. I said, Jesus Christ, you've got a funny teammate today, haven't you? I said, well, to be quite frank with you, you know, we've lost half the team to injury. We've just gone away to whoever it was, and Quins had got a win or something else. 3 hamstrings, an ACL, 2 concussions, whatever else. And he just explained to me how none of their international players had played for don't know how many weeks. They got a little bit of a run out for 30 minutes just to get them a bit match shot. They were, you know, ready to go, full noise, every single player ready to rock. And we got hammered, you know, type of thing. And we were also keeping our eye on the game next week, thinking we need to rest. If it's 50-50, we'll rest them for next week. And sadly, Jim, that's where it's got to. That's where it's got to. And, you know, I think because of the structure of our league and almost the strength of our league is its competitiveness. So amazing games at the weekend. You know, Bath probably should have beat Gloucester. Let's be frank, Gloucester's more gets them out of trouble and away, but Bath looking loads better. You know, Quinn's game, you know, just fantastic game every bloody week. It's like a Rocky film, isn't it? You know, watching the Premiership. And I think that's also our detriment in Europe. So you know, sadly, lots of teams make a choice after about round 2 of the Heineken Cup. Have we got a couple of wins yet? Okay, well, we'll crack on and go. If you've maybe lost a couple, you know, you're in a pool with Leinster and you know, whoever, Toulouse or whatever it might be, you have to make a call about, you know, what's going on, because you know you're going to be coming up against teams who've been rested, ready to go, full of internationals, and probably spent 3 times your budget. And it doesn't mean that you've given up, and everybody loves European rugby. But honestly, if I speak to your average Gloucester supporter, Wasps, Quins, Bath, Leicester supporter, and I know this from speaking to the other CEOs, the attendances for Heineken Cup matches, which always used to be through the roof, are a lot lower than the Gallagher Premiership now, because people aren't stupid. They get it. They know that there's a chance we're going to go for it. But do you know what? If we lose the first couple, we're probably not. So I share your concerns, but you know, it's not going to change overnight. And Leinster aren't going to change their model because, you know, we've got a compelling league. And I think, and this is why I said earlier, you know, having a salary cap at a certain level, I think there are 4 or 5 objectives of the Premiership. One is to have a competitive model. 2 is, you know, to effectively make sure that everybody, you know, can compete, and you know, the lowest club's got a chance of beating the top club. But the other one is about, you know, trying to win in Europe because it's good for the game. So I have a lot of sympathy for the counter view of mine. My view at the minute is around making sure that everybody can play rugby, and we've got teams dotted all around the country for kids to get involved with and supporters to interact with. But equally, if I'm sitting there in Exeter or Harlequins or Leicester, I probably don't care what Steve Vaughan thinks, because we're yesterday's news. They just want to win the bloody Heineken Cup. So therefore, they'll do everything that they can to get the best squad that they can and keep going back to it. But as far as the model is concerned, it allows them to do that to a point. But will it allow them on a regular basis to compete with the teams that are spending 2 or 3 times more than them? Well, of course it won't. So you know, there's no surprise that the English teams are not competing in Europe like they used to.
And just on that, you mentioned Munster there, and obviously their model over in Ireland is the IRFU centrally contracting a certain number of players, and all the money comes down to Munster and Leinster from the IRFU. It's obviously a pyramid system. Jim's mentioned it on here before, 3 or 4 years ago now. Central contracts just being around the corner. Well, 4 years is a fucking long corner, Jim, let me tell you. But The RFU, have they got any sort of interest in centrally contracting players and helping the clubs out in that sense? Whereas actually, if you do that and they take a load off it, each club can obviously promote their own youngsters and pay those guys, and then you've got the internationals coming for the European games just as much as that. Is that a model that can work now, or is that something that the RFU are looking at?
I think if there's ever a time to have that conversation, it's now. I'm a big advocate of, if something isn't working, just stop and just see what we can do as a group of people. I would like to think that the people involved, the Conor O'Shea's, the Bill Sweeney's, can start reaching out now and saying, look, central contract. I actually believe central contracts are a good thing. There's an element of you that it's, for example, I don't know. You pick a cricketer who's on a central contract. How many times does he get seen at Edgbaston or at Headingley or wherever else? That is a problem. If Saracens have got Mara Toji, they want to play him, and you've got to be mindful. But it will mean that in my opinion, that the model works better because you can bring through more and more of the young English homegrown players as well. So there's been nothing mooted at the moment about that. But yeah, I do think it's definitely worth throwing into the mix and having a conversation about. I think there's a lot of clubs that would welcome that at the moment, with regards to allowing them to take some of the slack off the cost line effectively for that particular season and those players.
Stephen, there's been some chat about a merger with London Irish. Is there any truth to that?
No, none whatsoever.
Would you be open to a merger? I know everything's on the table, but Worcester's down the road, for example.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, I'm not in work, so I've got an interview at Costa at 6:00, so I can't hang about. But I don't think the merge idea would work, to be quite frank. There's a number of reasons for it, but of course you'd be open. It won't happen with Wasps. We've got a very specific period of time to get something done, and we would never be able to merge in that specific period of time. So I don't see any mergers happening. Too complicated, too complex. Academy boundaries, ownership groups, P shares, RF. I'd hate to be a naysayer, but I just don't see that happening.
In terms of what you said then around, we've got a period of time where we can find a solution. You obviously asked the players to obviously take contracts if they can. There's obviously a lot of interest around the Premiership for a number of players. Listen, Wasps have got some unbelievable players in that squad. How do they manage that? Other clubs are up to the salary cap spend. Are they, obviously you want to keep as many of them together if there is a rebirth of Wasps after this sort of administration. How are you handling that as a CEO that's obviously not employed anymore?
Yeah, well, look, without sounding like a bloody martyr, I'm going to work FOC until, if Wasps had a heartbeat, until that stops, I'm just going to do what I can, irrespective. It sounds a bit corny and cheesy, but when you go, I could work in a different environment and earn fortunes versus what I earn in sport, but sport gets in your veins, and Wasps has got in my veins, the legends, the former players group, the supporters, and it's almost a bit of a because certain factions in Coventry haven't really taken to us. Let's just put it mildly. Almost makes you feel a little bit like Mourinho piece, where you go, well, sod you lot. We're gonna, and it brings you closer, and you're much more of a family and united. I'm just gonna do what I can whilst I'm still able to. Try and get as many people. I've been speaking to some high net worths today. Other conversations ongoing on Thursday. I've been keeping the coaching Lee up to speed, and Dave Bassett and what's going on. They're aware. They're coming in with us on Thursday as well. We've kept the gym open. But to answer your question, speaking to the boys yesterday very openly. I won't tell you the names because it's not right, but good international, high quality players that probably get a game anywhere. And I'm sure they wouldn't mind me saying this, but at the moment, because of the salary cap and because of the market, this isn't going to surprise you. Some of the deals that are being offered out there are unbelievably low for very, very good players. And I mean, very good players. There was a bunch of lads all in tears yesterday. We were speaking about it, and these are very seasoned pros and internationals. And I said, well, anything in the offing, if nothing offers here. And some of the stuff they were telling me was nigh on scandalous. It's not the other club's fault. There's two things, isn't there? One, they haven't got much money in the cap, and B, they're in a position where, you know, they know that it's a buyer's market. Yeah, we've been speaking openly about the offers, either here, France, Japan, and we'll do anything that we can. You know, I've had directors of rugby from other clubs phone me about our players, and it's the weirdest feeling, especially our young players, because I don't know how to explain it. It feels a bit like you know, watching somebody else sleep with your wife. You know, because you've invested in these players, you've signed them, you've scouted them, especially the young lads who've come through the system, and then a director of rugby, no fault of theirs, phones me up and says, "What's X like? You know, and how much is he getting paid at the minute?" Clearly, I won't tell them that bit, but yeah, it was killing me yesterday, absolutely killing me. Because you think, no, they're Wasps players. They deserve to be here and they want to be here. And by God, do the boys want to be here? And some of these internationals, by the way, who I thought in my head would just say, that's it then, we're off now, we're going to bugger off. Inundated, you know, please let me know as soon as you can. Even if it's in the Championship, we want to stay. You know, so, and that would be an emotional play for them. But I also think their agents have been looking in the market and have probably said as well, guys, look, you know, it ain't what you think it is. There's not a lot out there, especially if you want to stay in this country.
What percentage of their worth are they getting offered? Like, let's say if you've got a 500 grand player, like what ridiculous salaries are they getting offered in the market at the moment?
Well, firstly, we don't have any £500,000 players, and trust me, we used to. We don't anymore. Look, I don't really want to go there. They're all different, but you know, I spoke to at least 3 or 4 players yesterday who were getting offered less than half of what they're being paid now. You know, it may be the first line of negotiation and all the rest of it, but you know, I often get asked, you know, is it the players' fault? Do they get paid too much? You know, for doing what they do, and do they need to take pay cuts and all the rest of it? I'll tell you now, players do not get paid too much. It is a brutal sport. You boys know better than I do, you know, and the amount of injuries and their head knocks they're going through. It's a short career. Yeah, you might earn £300,000-400,000, but not for 10 years. You don't. Generally, you earn it for 2 contracts, maybe. And I've got absolute nothing but admiration for our lads. And as I said to them yesterday, if they can go and get a better deal somewhere else, go. You know, go. We really want you to stay, but you know, you don't owe us anything now. So yeah, some of the offers were coming in which were mind-bogglingly low compared to the value of those players. You know, and if I told you who those players were, you wouldn't believe it. There's a chunk of them I thought would just be off by now. Personally, got very surprised yesterday how emotional they were, how much they love being at Wasps, and that they don't want to go. But then when I found out some of the offers out there for them, wow.
Pod.
Rugby pod.